Well, good evening. It's really lovely to see you and a very warm welcome. Just in case anyone doesn't know me, I'm Luke, the Rector of the Avon Valley Churches, and it's me who's put this thing on. And I hope that it is something that is helpful to people, whether you've been coming to church for 50 years or have never set foot across the doorstep of a church. My aim is just to help people. This sort of started when I run the Alpha course, as many of you here know, and I love the Alpha course. And it asks some really great questions, like who is Jesus, why did Jesus die, why should we go to church, all those sort of questions it asks. But I was just thinking about it and I thought, those are great questions, but are they actually the questions people are asking? And so I tried to think, and I hope I've got it as right as I can, about what questions people are actually asking, as I say, whether they come to church or not. And so I came up with this series of questions. Does science disprove Christianity, which we'll talk about a bit more today. Next week we'll talk about, if God is a God of love, why is there suffering? I think that's a question I know people are asking. November the 19th, is death the end, or can we hope for something beyond death? Then we'll go on to, is there any evidence to support belief in God, any logical arguments? And then the last one is there any answer to the sin and evil that we see in the world? So I hope those are good questions that I think a lot of people are asking. And so I thought that might be something that would help and encourage people. And that's why I chose them, and that's why they're on. So I hope I was correct on that. So we're starting today, of course, with, does science disprove Christianity? And that's what we're going to be thinking about today. So let's right to it. When we think about science and Christianity, and I think if you asked most people whether they go to church or not actually, but particularly people who don't go to church, most people would say, yes, science disproves Christianity. I think most people would say that. That's a fairly common attitude, isn't it? And I think the three areas where most people see conflict between science and Christianity is things like creation and the Big Bang, which I'll talk about as we go on, the whole issue of evolution, and are humans in any sense special? And you'll see what I mean by that as we go on. So anyway, let's get right to it. In many ways, I think that science and Christianity are in fact bedfellows. Both seek answers, it seems to me, to some of the fundamental questions of our existence. Questions like, how did the earth and the universe come into existence? In what ways are humans like animals, and in what ways, if any, are we different? And I think both science and Christianity or religion try to answer those questions. So in fact, in many ways, we're asking the same questions. And furthermore, I think it's worth reminding ourselves as we think about this, that both the Christianity and science have not always been in endless conflict. Indeed, many of the great scientists of history were believers in God, many of them Christians. And it was partly their love of and fascination with God's creation that moved many of them to investigate the universe that was around them. So, for example, Nicholas Copernicus, who, as you know, was the astronomer who first suggested that the sun was at the centre of the solar system, he was, in fact, a canon in the Catholic Church. Now, I know that there was a big fallout between him and the Catholic Church subsequently, but he was a man of faith. Gregor Mendel, who was an Augustinian friar, but was also the father of modern genetics. Roger Bacon, an important figure in the development of the scientific method, was again a Franciscan friar. Isaac Newton was a devout believer, not a Trinitarian believer, but definitely a believer. And whilst being one of the greatest, I would suggest, scientific minds of all time, he also wrote extensively on theology. So it's really interesting that people of scientific integrity can also be people of faith. And without wanting to embarrass him, at the end of the talk today, I'm going to interview my friend here, Professor Richard Thompson, who is tell me if I get this right, Professor of Experimental Physics in the Quantum Optics and Laser Science. Is that right? at Imperial College London. I almost don't even understand your title. Anyway, he's a friend, and I'll be talking to him briefly at the end of this. So I'll finish my talk, interview Richard briefly, and then we'll have an open forum where you can genuinely ask any questions that you like, and we will do our best to answer them. We won't have all the answers, I don't suppose, but we will do our best with love and honesty to answer what we can. So thank you, Richard, for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. But the point I was making was that historically, Christianity and science were to a degree two sides of the same coin, investigating and researching the amazing world and universe that God has made. But I suppose the real question is that true today? But if you ask most people, they would say no. I think they would say that science contradicts Christianity or even disproves it. So tonight I'm going to endeavour to look at the differences between science and Christianity as I best understand them, and to see if that is true, and to see if Christianity and science can stand together as co-investigators of this wonderful world. So I'm going to begin really by talking about who or what made the world. Now, of course, we all know that Christianity and most religions claim that God created the universe and the world. That's called creation or creationism. You know that very well. Meanwhile, modern scientific theories suggest that the universe began roughly 15 billion years ago with the Big Bang, with everything coming into being out of nothing. So there's clearly a difference there, isn't there? But here's an interesting thing that I've discovered as I was reading about this. Prior to the widespread acceptance of the Big Bang theory, most scientists believed in what they called a steady state hypothesis. In other words, they believed that the universe was eternal. There had been no beginning. And when the Big Bang theory became more accepted and more the standard belief, there were a number of scientists who were concerned because it opened the gate to a creation. One of them was Sir Fred Hoyle, a British astronomer, who criticised the Big Bang theory because it supported a religious view of creation. So perhaps Fred Hoyle, against his better judgment, I must say, was right. Perhaps there was a Big Bang, but God lit the fuse. Another significant area of difference is, of course, evolution and creation. Again, Genesis 1 suggests that God created humans in his image out of the earth, out of the soil, and that individual species were created by God as they exist basically today from nothing. Evolution, as you know, in contrast, claims that species gradually evolved over many millions of years, billions of years in fact, from primitive life forms. So again, there is a clear difference there, isn't there? A related question to that is this: what are human beings, and are they in any sense special or different from other animal life? Because Genesis, and in fact the rest of the Bible, suggests that humans are indeed different, that we are special and that we are made in the image of God, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Evolutionists would largely claim that humans are merely an evolved and intelligent species of ape. So clearly, as we look at those three areas, there are significant differences between what the Bible literally teaches and what modern science teaches, and we need to acknowledge those and not try to hide from them. So coming back to the first of those, how did the universe come into existence? As I've said, the traditional answer from Genesis is that God created the world in 6 days, and some creationist Christians have also tried to date it. They've added up the ages of all those people in the Bible and got back to, I think it's 4004 BC, if I got that right, which is interesting, at least 6,000 years ago, of course. But as we know, in contrast, science clearly teaches that this is not true, that roughly 15 billion years ago there was a Big Bang, and that since then the universe has been expanding, developing, and has become incredibly fruitful. And of course we must acknowledge this, and in fact I would want to, there is much evidence to support these theories. Just one example is what is called redshift, which is about how the light reaches us from different stars. And this is the observation that the light emitted from such stars, such distant stars, the light has shifted to the red end of the spectrum, suggesting that the waves of light have somehow been stretched. Now, to explain this, it's something similar to, you know, when you hear a car driving up towards you, drives up towards you, it passes you, and the sound changes, doesn't it? We know that's called the Doppler effect. I guess we all know that. Now, what's interesting about that, of course, is that the sound that the car is emitting does not change at any point. What actually changes is that the sound waves as the car is coming towards us are compressed because the car is moving towards us. And when it's moving away from us, the sound waves are stretched because the source of the sound is moving away from us. Hence the change in the sound that we perceive it, but the actual sound of the car doesn't change at all. That's the Doppler effect. I'm sure you know that. Well, the same thing happens with light. If an object that emits light is coming towards us, then the light waves are compressed. If an object that is emitting light is moving away from us, then the light waves are stretched. The same thing, a Doppler effect. And so the red shift is the observation made by Hubble, an American scientist, that the same thing is happening to the light that we can discern from distant stars. And when he looked at all the various light from these distant stars, he could discern that almost all of the stars were moving away from us. So the universe, therefore, we know, is expanding. And if you sort of logically follow that movement backwards, you go back to roughly 15 billion years ago when they started at a common central place. And so that evidence that exists that the universe is expanding supports what is called the Big Bang Theory. It's just one piece of evidence. There's many others, of course. But I just wanted to say to you that there are logical, well-researched scientific methods for believing in the Big Bang. And if we're going to actually, as I know some Christians still do, to say, no, this didn't happen, everything will happen 6,000 years ago when God made the world in 6 days, then we actually have to believe that, in a sense, the whole scientific community is conspiring together to tell us lies. And I don't think we can seriously say that. So to my mind, the Big Bang Theory is a truth that we as Christians should acknowledge and believe in, and I actually think rejoice in. It's part of helping us to understand the reality of the world and the universe that God has made. But I wanted you also to know that many scientists who believe absolutely in the Big Bang and in many other things that we've talked about also believe that God has a vital and central role in the creation and the sustaining of the universe. And one such scientist was a man called John Polkinghorne. John Polkinghorne was an English theoretical physicist. He was professor of mathematical physics at the University of Cambridge from 1968 to 1979. And for 25 years, he worked on theories about elementary particles, played a role in the discovery of the quark. If anyone can tell me exactly what that is, please do. But the point is this, he is also, or was also, he died in 2021, he was also a Christian. And he resigned his chair as a professor at Cambridge to study for the Anglican priesthood. And I'm just going to show you a short video of him talking.
John, in looking back on your remarkable career in science and in theology and in pioneering the relationship between science and theology, and also witnessing the increasing aggressiveness of atheistic views of the world from scientists mainly, what do you think right now are the best arguments for the existence of God?
Well, there are two kinds of arguments. One is called natural theology. This is looking at the world. We see a world that is immensely fertile in its character. The ball of energy is now the home of saints and scientists after 13.7 billion years of unfolding development. We see a world that is marvelously ordered in its basic fundamental structure. We see a world also the details of whose laws of nature are finely tuned to permit the possibility of carbon-based life. It's only a very special universe, a universe in a trillion, you might say, that is capable of producing carbon and therefore producing carbon-based life. Now, these things are things that science discovers but doesn't explain. And they seem to me to be too significant to be simply happy accidents. And I would like to make them intelligible, and belief in a creator whose mind is behind the order of the world and purpose behind its fruitfulness does make them intelligible. That would be one argument for the existence of God. Not a knockdown argument. I don't say that my friends who don't see it that way are stupid, that sort of thing, but that is to me more intellectually satisfying than treating these things as just brute facts. But then that leaves many other things unanswered about God. I mean, does God care for individual people? Gives you a picture of God as the cosmic architect, but that's about as far as it takes you. Now, to learn more about God, we have to depend upon acts of divine self-disclosure, which theology calls revelation. We can't put God to the test. God is not to be manipulated in that sort of way. To try and do that is the mistake of magic. And so we have to ask, have we reason to think that God has acted in particular people or particular circumstances to make the divine nature known more clearly than we see it? And that's the role in faith traditions of the great founder figures of the faith and the accumulated experience of the faith. And in the Christian case, of course, we believe that God acted particularly through his ancient people of Israel and through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That you have to look at. You have to assess it carefully. You just don't take it. You're not reading something that's dictated to you. Take it or leave it. You have to say, do we believe these things really happened? Do we believe they really had significance? That's absolutely important. That's very often called systematic theology. That's a very important part of trying to learn something about the nature of God and of God's existence.
So let's look at both of those a little
Right.
carefully. On the first argument in natural theology, many philosophers, even philosophers of religion who are believers, would reject all of that and they'd say in today's world that natural theology doesn't work. And one of the reasons it doesn't work is there are other explanations. The popular one today is the multiple universes, so that whereas the fine-tuning of our universe looks like it has some design elements, in fact, if you have virtually an infinite number of multiple universes generated through physical processes and so-called eternal inflation, bubbling off many different universes over time, that some of those will have all different characteristics, and maybe it's carbon-based life, maybe some other based life. And so that's not unusual that we're looking in this one, because if we were in a universe in which we couldn't exist, we wouldn't exist and wouldn't ask the question. So that's used to completely dismiss natural theology.
I don't think it succeeds in doing that, because I think it has assumptions that are very open to question. First of all, it is not a established scientific hypothesis that there is any other universe than the one that we can actually observe. And even if there were an infinite array of those universes, it doesn't follow that any desirable property, like being able to produce carbon-based life, would be present even in an infinite array. There are an infinite number of even integers, but none of them has the property of oddness. and so I'm not convinced by those arguments. I think they don't work not with persuasive force. Also, the multiverse argument simply, I think, serves one explanatory purpose. It explains away the particular fine-tuned character of our universe. But even the existence of a creator does much more explanatory work than that. Not only explains the order of the world and its fruitfulness, it also explains, in my view, the origin of our ethical knowledge as intimations of God's good and perfect will. It explains our aesthetic experiences as a sharing of the Creator's joy in creation. Of course, it also explains the, I think, well-documented, if perplexingly varied, human account of encounter with spiritual reality. So there's a sort of cumulative case for theism, which I don't think is reflected on the multiverse side of things.
Thank you. So a man of real stature as a scientist, but who decided to resign his chair at Cambridge University and to study for the priesthood, becoming an ordained Anglican priest in 1982. It's really interesting, isn't it? Moving on. How did human beings come into existence, and what are humans? Again, the traditional answer from Genesis 1 and Genesis 3, and indeed elsewhere in the Bible, is that God created all species, basically as they exist today out of nothing, and that humans are a special creation, being made in the image of God, having moral responsibility, and being able to relate to God. Now, evolutionary theory, as you know, suggests that life first appeared on Earth roughly 3.5 billion years ago. Nobody, of course, is sure how it began, but that since then life has evolved and become increasingly varied and in some cases developed, and that humans are basically an intelligent species of ape, and that humans have only existed for around 200,000 years. Now again, just to put my cards on the table, it seems to me that evolutionary theory makes sense and is largely proven. The fossil record supports it. Radiocarbon dating of fossils supports it. And there are clear biological links and commonalities between humans, other apes, and indeed between us and other species. For example, the 5-digit hand or paw is seen in flippers, in hands, in wings, of all sorts of species of animals, and is a common thing in most vertebrates. So I accept 100% as a very committed Christian, most of you know that evolution is true, and I would say has added to our knowledge of creation and of this wonderful world. But I would suggest to you that evolution fails to satisfy most people as a description of what it is to be human. The biblical account of human origins, whilst not being literally true, I think Genesis 1 and 2 are parables, they teach us some really important things. For example, they do teach us that humans are special, made in the image of God. And it seems to me that we are different. Humans have achieved 1 billion times more than any other species. Machines, roads, medicines, art, theatre, music, flight, even space travel. It's astonishing the difference between us and any other species. I would suggest to you that we are so much more than just a clever ape. The Christian teaching of humankind also teaches us that life matters, that killing is wrong. You see, if a person kills another person, we are rightly outraged and we choose to punish the killer. If a lion kills another lion, we ask David Attenborough to commentate on it, and we watch it with fascination. There is a difference to how we see morality relating to us and other animals. We are different. Humans are different to other animals in other ways. We are self-aware. We are morally responsible. We are spiritual. I think the reality of human sin, evil, and guilt is significant. If I kick you, I've done something wrong. If a New Forest pony kicks you, it's probably you've done something wrong. It's an interesting difference, isn't it? But it is true. So we have a sense of right and wrong, human responsibility, sin and guilt, which no other animal on earth has anywhere like what we have. Excuse my bad English there. We also have the ability to know God. The spiritual account of who we are, the biblical account, explains that absolutely. We build churches, we develop elaborate religious rituals to address a being that we cannot even see. It's a totally unique thing for the human species. We have free will. We are creative, art, music, and so forth. And we do this not just for evolutionary purposes. We don't sing like a bird to attract a mate or to communicate. We sing because singing is beautiful. So we do it even when it has no practical or evolutionary purpose. We still do it. Art, beauty, music are things that matter to us for themselves. And that, I think, is part of us being made in the image of God. God is a creator who made a beautiful world, and he's put that desire to make beauty in us. As I've said, we're responsible for our own moral decisions. Animals are not. We are capable, in contrast, of altruism, love and kindness. And again, that's a really interesting thing, that there are times when humans will lay down their lives to save another. Now, in evolutionary terms, that makes no sense. In evolutionary terms, we're meant to make sure that our DNA is able to reproduce. But there are times when humans will say, no, that doesn't matter. I see the needs of others as greater than mine. These are astonishing things. The biblical account of us being made in the image of God means that your life has purpose and significance. If you really are just an evolved ape, then frankly you're a biological dot on a planet, which is a dot in the corner of the universe, and actually your life doesn't matter at all. Well, we know that's not true, don't we? We feel it in our heart that that's not true. Your life and the life of others matters. And it's only religion and faith that truly gives us a sense of value and purpose. We also have a deep inner sense that there is more to life than this life. And only religion and faith help us to explore that and to have any confidence about that. So I would suggest to you that evolution, which I do believe in, fails to address or to explain or to justify any of those truths. And let's not forget that those truths that I've described about free will, about art, about beauty, about selfishness, about kindness, these are the things that are most important to us as humans. And they only really find meaning and reality and significance because God has given them that. So only religion, I would suggest, fully and adequately explains and interprets human life. Now, we have to be honest with each other. There are different responses of Christian people and other religious people to science. Some Christians still reject the Big Bang and evolution, still believe that God made the universe roughly 6,000 years ago, take Genesis 1 and 2 literally, and reject scientific teaching as a hoax. I have to be straight with you, I think they are mistaken in those beliefs. Other Christians reject Genesis 1 and 2 completely. It's a load of old religious nonsense. It has no value today. We now know it's all disproved. I think that they are also mistaken, because in fact Genesis 1 and 2, as I'll say in a few minutes, have great value for us. Other Christians, and these are, I'm obviously speaking, you could say in a slightly biased way, but this is my beliefs, accept the Big Bang and evolution, believe that God made the Big Bang happen, believe that God has been a guiding hand in the development of the universe and in evolution, and they see Genesis 1 and 2 as parables with very significant meaning, not literally true, but definitely spiritually true. If you look at the story of creation and the story of the fall, what do we see? We see a picture of a God who made a good world, and a God who made people who are good, but that human sin has come into that world and has broken relationships, polluted the world, and damaged others around them. And that the only way to get back what we should do is to repent and to turn back to God. There's real depth and truth in Genesis 1 and 2. It doesn't have to be literally true for it to teach us truths that we all know are real. So I'd suggest to you that Genesis 1 and 2 was written 3,000 years ago to nomadic people who are far less advanced in the ways that we understand that word advanced than we are, and so God spoke to them in a parable to teach them those important truths, that God made the universe, that God made us, that what he made was and isn't good, that humans have value and significance, and that human sin has harmed us and the world that we live in. And I thank God that he did teach us those things, because they are self-evidently true, as we see every time we look at the news. So my belief is that it is very possible for us to learn from the Bible, but also to learn from and to value all the benefits we get from science. We should do both. And so as I draw to an end, I just want to say to you how I think religious people should view science, and I hope that's okay for any of you here who wouldn't regard yourself as religious. Firstly, I think we as Christians should thank God for science. We must welcome truth, mustn't we, wherever it comes from. whether it's from science or religion or from philosophy or from wherever. We welcome truth. We benefit, of course, in so many ways from science and knowledge, don't we? Medicine, transport, communication, technology, and so we could go on. Science and the knowledge that we have gained from it have been of immense benefit to humankind. So the first thing we must surely do is thank God for science. But the second thing we must do is acknowledge the limits of science. Science does not explain to us what makes us different as humans. It doesn't help us to understand if the ready is right or wrong. It doesn't help us to understand that every human life matters. It doesn't help us to understand the reality of sin and evil. There are many things that science cannot answer, and we need to acknowledge that. Thirdly, I think that we must also thank God for the Bible and for God's revelation, which John Polkinghorne talked about in that video. Genesis 1 and 2 may not be literally true, but they are spiritually true. They teach us very important things that we need to hold on to. So my conclusion this evening is this, that both science and Christianity are of immense value, and that they each help us to understand ourselves and the world better. We need them both. Amen. Okay, Richard, are you willing to come up and talk to us for a few moments? Richard is a friend of mine, which is one of the many crosses he has to bear. But I did say who you were, but could you just remind us of who you are and what your job is and what your job's been over the past years, so that we understand a little about you?
Yeah, okay. So my name is Richard Thompson. I've worked at Imperial College in London for about 40 years in total. I'm a professor in the physics department. I'm now mainly retired, but still working a little bit. I've been, during my time there, I've had various involvements in teaching, like most academics, and in research and in administration of different sorts. And my research is in the area of, so it's atomic physics, but I have to say very quickly that atomic physics doesn't mean that I'm involved in making atomic weapons and all that sort of stuff, because that's a complete misnomer. So what atomic physics means is that in my experimental work, I study atoms. Atoms are all around us, that's what we're made of, and we try and understand how the atoms are made, and the way we do that is by probing them, by shining laser beams on the atoms to try and understand how they interact with the light, and that tells us about how the atoms are made. So no bombs and no nuclear power. So that's what my research has been involved with, and in fact, maybe later I will say something about mysteries in science, but the sort of work that I've been doing recently probes one of the areas of science which is still very mysterious, and where there are significant aspects that are not understood, which is about quantum mechanics. So people talk about nowadays there's a whole load of quantum technology, which is technology built around the use of individual atoms and so on, and the way that quantum mechanics works, so the way we understand things at the level of a single atom or a single electron or whatever, there are lots of mysteries there still. So science has many answers, but there are many areas of science where there are no answers yet, because there's still a lot more to do, and there are lots of things that we don't understand. So anyway, that's me, and that's what I've been doing.
Very interesting to hear. I've known him all those years. I didn't know half of that, but anyway.
By the way, I should congratulate you on your description of the Doppler effect.
Oh right, thank you.
I couldn't have done better myself. So that was very good.
Now let me ask you another question. How can an intelligent man like you, rooted in science, how can you also be a person of faith? That sort of, doesn't that make no sense? Or how do you tie those things together and hold those things together?
Okay, well, of course, I don't see a conflict, or else I wouldn't be here. So I don't see any conflict between being a scientist and being a Christian. And I think that my faith informs the way I go about my science, and I think that my scientific beliefs and understanding have an influence on my faith and the way I act that out in my life. So I don't see any conflict, and for all the reasons that you've described. And in particular, if you think about creation, I would say it's not right to view the Bible as a sort of a scientific textbook that aims to tell you these details about exactly how things happened, in 6 days or whatever. That's not what the Bible is there for. It's not intended to be a literal description of how things came about. I think it functions on a much deeper level, because it's using stories and parables and myths to explain and to describe deeper truths that I think are more important than and more relevant for us than perhaps exactly how the universe started 15 billion years ago. So I don't see any conflict between science and religion. In contrast, I think that they inform and support each other. And at my work, I've come across people who, as you say, think that science disproves Christianity, or at least that science makes a belief in Christian principles unsustainable. But I've also come across many colleagues who, like me, have a strong faith and who regard their faith as supporting their scientific work, including some, as John Polkinghorne was, very, very prominent and well-established people. I mean, my own experiences within physics, but other areas as well. So, there's clearly a lot of practicing scientists who don't see any conflict there at all.
Thank you. So I think it'd be good to open the floor to questions now. We'll do our best to answer any questions that you've got. To myself, to Richard, and others, of course, can help us to answer as well. So does anybody come with any questions that they would like to ask, or questions have been raised? Jeremy, thank you.
Well, I agree with everything you've said, bar one.
Okay.
I mean, just take the horse's hoof in your hand.
Yeah.
I can tell you exactly bone by bone
Yes.
how they're the
Yes.
same, nearly.
Yeah.
And so on. And doing things like embryo transfer, which I was doing with horses, you do get a sense of reverence when you're holding a little watch glass with a horse in it.
Yeah.
But you said God made us in his own image. In his own image?
Yes.
I question those words.
Thank you. Well, it comes from Genesis 1:26 and 27, as you probably know. But I don't. But
I do believe everything you've said.
Oh yeah. But remember, the Bible says God is spirit. So I don't think we are physically in God's image.
Thank you.
I think that we are in God's image in that we have a sense of right and wrong, that we are creative, that we are spiritual beings, that we are designed to love and to give and to receive love. So there's all sorts of ways like that I think are things that are in human nature that, when we are operating as we should be, reflect the character and the nature of God. And I think that's what it means when it says that we're made in the image of God, not the physicality of us.
So taking us as the greatest thing ever created towards God, then we've got certain characteristics that are the same.
Yes, because physically we are very similar to, let's say, an ape, aren't we?
Exactly.
But
So
in terms
image is not a good word.
in terms of our mind and our spirit and art and beauty and, as I said, the ability to selflessly sacrifice oneself for others, things like that, I think these are uniquely human characteristics that reflect the nature and the character of God.
Characteristics is a good word.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy.
Can I ask you, were you a Christian before you became a scientist, or was it the other way around?
Yes, I was a Christian first. And so that probably happened when I was about 14, 15, that sort of age. And at that stage, I was, I would have been doing O-levels in old money at school, and so that was certainly before I became a scientist.
And
yes.
do you feel, therefore, that it's more difficult for scientists to become Christians?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I think when and where and how you become a Christian is independent, I think, of whether you're a practicing scientist or some other sort of have some other sort of training or whatever. So I don't think that it would be more difficult if you were a scientist to become a Christian than for other people.
Is it more common to be a Christian first than a scientist, or is it?
That's hard to tell. I don't know. I'm sure you get both. I'm sure you get both, but I don't have any strong sense that one comes first or the other comes first.
And coming back to Jeremy's question, I think that science, is again part of us being made in the image of God. That image, that ability to see beyond what the human eye can see and to ask questions as deep as the ones that you're asking about the structure of atoms, is again a uniquely human thing. And I forget who it was, you might remember, there's one scientist who said in science we are thinking God's thoughts after him. And I think that's actually a wonderful way to see science. Yes.
Don't know whether I can explain exactly what I'm wanting to ask, but talking to you as somebody who is researching and coming across new things all the time and looking, to explore and discover things. Looking back, evolution has come such a long way. We were nowhere. And just talking to, grandchildren and that, what is the purpose of dinosaurs? What was the purpose of some of the things that were created and lost? And we're still going along and going forward. I am absolutely where you are, but I sometimes find it hard to answer those sort of questions.
Great question.
I would say that that during that that 15 billion years or however long it is, well, certainly less than that on the Earth, but that process of evolution, I think that is a natural process, and there are places where it came to dead ends, and there are places where it's continued through, and so I think I from my own point of view, I don't feel that God is intervening actively all the time during that evolution. I think it's a natural process, and it naturally comes to some dead ends, and it naturally leads forward in other cases. And I think I do believe that we have evolved in the same way that other animals that we see around us have evolved. But I still believe that we are special in the way that you described. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. But it also there's also the other question of whether God knows exactly from the beginning to the end what is happening in our world.
Yeah, I think who knows? I think that's really, really hard. But I think what I would say to that is I would say that God is outside time, and so what appears as a sequence to us is maybe different from his point of view, if you put it like that. A friend of mine used to say, this was Dennis, a dear friend of mine used to say that he pictured it like this, that you would have a road and you would look down on the road and you would see cars travelling along the road, and maybe you could see what was going to happen if there was a problem or something, but that from the point of view of somebody on the road in the car, you couldn't see what was coming. And so, maybe in that sense, God is outside our experience and and therefore senses what for us is not we can't perceive.
Okay. Peter.
I've got kind of 3 points, which is things which I've sort of discovered over the years. The first one was Nicky Gumbel. He tends to say the Bible teaches us the why and science teaches us the how. Found that quite useful. And the second thing was when Jesus is talking about creation, and he says, in the beginning God created, he says he created the male and female. He doesn't specifically mention Adam and Eve. So we do know that the differentiation male and female, that's the big thing. So that doesn't go against evolution. And the third point, it's perhaps a different one I was thinking of. We all find the story of the prodigal son totally believable, but it's not literal. It's not a literal thing, but there's so much meaning in it. Yeah. And I feel like you both feel that Genesis is a wonderful parable, and it's got so much meaning in it, and it's really true, but it's not literally kind of all the details.
I think we now think of books to be literally true, and I think in those days when the Bible was written, that wasn't the way that you expected to interpret things, to see them as literal, but you saw them as telling a story, as revealing truths.
Yeah, and I also think from God's perspective, let's say Genesis was written 3,000 years ago, to best guess. If God wanted to say to people, I made the world, I made a good world, sin has messed up the world, I'm reaching out to you, is he going to then say to this wandering tribe in the Middle East, oh, by the way, 15 billion years ago, there was a big, it would just be absolute nonsense to them. So I think it makes total sense that God said, this is what I want you to know. I'm not going to explain all the whys, hows and wherefores of it, because it's not relevant to you, it's not important to you. But what is important is that you know that I made a good world, that your sin has messed it up, that I'm reaching out to you. That picture in Genesis of God walking in the garden saying, where are you? That's a picture of me. Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 is a picture of me. I sin, I mess up. And God is walking in the garden saying, Luke, at times, where are you? So this amazing parable is as relevant to us individually today as it ever was. And I think when you look at it that way, that you can totally see why God chose to speak to humankind those thousands of years ago in a parable, because that was the only thing that was actually going to get... Imagine him trying to explain the Big Bang, which we still can't understand now. They'd have given up, wouldn't they, and walked off and said, I don't know what he's talking about. It just would have been totally pointless, I think. So to me, it makes total sense that God spoke to them in a way that they could understand and that related to them and that said what mattered. That's how I see the early chapters of Genesis.
And I think it's interesting that, sometimes people might say, well, the Christian view, believing that there's a creator God and so on, it doesn't make any sense, and you have to make a real leap of faith to believe that, it may seem sort of it's very difficult to get to grasp that idea, but I think it's that's just as true of what our scientific colleagues say to us about creation from the scientific point of view.
Well, the whole multiverse thing, for example.
Well, yes, that's right. And so explaining things like the multiverse, or explaining about the Big Bang. I mean, nobody understands actually how the Big Bang works, and so you need just as much of a leap of faith to believe that as you do to accept the idea of a creator God alongside it. I'm not saying instead of, but alongside it. So I think even if you take a scientific view and you have nothing to do with religion, you still have to make you have to really stretch your imagination to believe what you would hear, for instance, from Brian Cox or whoever, telling you about how everything started, because it is so extreme and incomprehensible to us.
Yeah, and it's the best guess, a very intelligent best guess, that in 20 years' time may have completely changed, of course.
Indeed.
Yeah, because that's the way of science. Is there anybody else who's got questions? I want to make sure that everybody who wants to ask questions, we're doing our best to answer them here. Thank you, yes.
Within the scientific community, who challenged your faith the most? What was the issue involved? What was the conversation?
That's a difficult one. I don't. I don't think that I can't pinpoint particular sort of challenging sort of discussions or points. I think that I've had various discussions with people, scientists and people who aren't scientists, about matters of faith, but I can't think of any particular point where that challenge came. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Jeremy.
Well, I have a second one.
Yes, sure.
Richard, I have perceived that in the last few years, artificial intelligence is rising exponentially, and it's a great danger to Christianity. Because Christianity is about faith, and artificial intelligence is about facts. And maybe there's a contradiction there, and I think it will be to the destruction of Christianity and younger people.
I think there are lots of dangers from artificial intelligence. I don't particularly see that it particularly affects Christian faith. And it's not about facts. I mean, as I'm sure you well know, artificial intelligence will often come up with things which might well have been true but actually aren't. And all it's doing is it's working with resources that are already out there, on the internet or whatever, and it's looking for patterns and so on. So, I mean, I'm sure artificial intelligence will express some views if you asked it about religious questions, but I don't think that, I don't see it particularly as being a threat to religion. I see it being a potential threat to society, of course, as many other people do. But I don't think it's particularly a threat to faith.
And if I may just take you up, forgive me, Jeremy, on one thing, I don't think that faith and facts are contradictory to each other. I think that faith and facts, as I say, we seek truth wherever it comes from. And I rejoice in science. I love, even though I struggle to read them, I love when I hear about, people sending things out to the far edges of our solar system, and when people are exploring the nature of the Big Bang and things like this. I find this stuff fascinating. It's helping us to understand better this amazing world, amazing universe that God has given us. And so I think that we must rejoice in truth wherever it comes from. As Christians, Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." Therefore, truth, wherever it comes from, is, I think, something that we should rejoice in, to be honest. So, yeah.
But I think the artificial intelligence doesn't necessarily involve truth.
Yes, I know. Forgive me. You just said at the end, you said Christianity is about faith and it's about facts. And you said, you implied that there was a problem there. I don't think there can be a problem between faith and facts, personally, if they are genuinely facts. If they're not genuinely facts, then there's a problem for everybody. But anyway, I think getting into AI is a bit off the track. But yes, hi, thank you.
I've not formulated the question properly, so it sounds a bit clumsy, I apologise. But it is not unrelated to the point raised by the gentleman, and also to the chap at the back who asked you, has your faith been challenged by another scientist, and it's if artificial intelligence, and we don't know how it will evolve, and that's an appropriate word perhaps to use, but if it were to take off in some unknown exponential direction and were to, at some future point, achieve sentience, and who knows where that could lead it, would that sentience and, in effect, that this new life and all that comes with that, would that represent a challenge to a creator God, to faith itself?
If I may start,
yes.
I think not, in as much as God, I think, is the creator of the whole universe. And I think sometimes our picture of God, I don't mean this at all rudely, David, is too small. He's the creator of the universe. He is so unbelievably big that we can't conceive of it. And I think some technological, scientific invention like AI is it's a dot compared to him, I think. Okay, that's my belief. I do think that there are concerns about AI, particularly about the truth, actually, coming back to your point. I think we are losing an awareness of what the truth is. You can already go on things on Facebook and see, I've seen Keir Starmer trying to sell us things. It's not Keir Starmer. It's some sort of dodgy thing that's been made. And we are going to get to the point, I fear, when we're going to turn on our TVs or our computers and we're not going to know whether what we believe is true or not. So I have very real concerns about it, but not that concern. Do you want to say anything, or is that enough?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point about whether as AI develops, effectively you're saying whether it could become conscious, sentient. And I mean, who knows? I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it raises a whole host of moral and religious questions, and I suspect we're just not equipped to deal with them. And let's hope it doesn't happen, I think.
Thank you.
I was just interested in when you said about the road and God is outside time, looking at that. I believe in continuous creation. God is still creating the world. He's outside time. So he spoke the words of creation from beginning to end, all of space-time, all in one go. So we're trudging through it. And that's really my problem. Why is there a now? Because the atoms that you look at don't have a now. They don't have a direction of time. So why do we? And the other thing is, when I was a lad, they talked about the entropy of everything getting more disorganised would cause the heat death of the universe. Nobody talks about that anymore. Why is... It's got to do with that, isn't it? When does it start? When does time start getting experienced?
I think so. People do. So there is a. You said how the universe is expanding, and I think it's still not quite. People aren't still quite sure whether the universe will continue expanding forever, or whether at some point it will turn around and come back again. And I mean, it's worth saying that at the moment we only know what approximately 4% of the universe consists of, and the other 96% is unknown materials. So, in a sense that we know that they're there, but we have absolutely no idea what the rest of the universe is made of. Either that, or there's some fundamental misunderstanding about the laws of physics, like gravity. So that was what I was hinting at before, and I was saying that there are still mysteries within science. However, coming back to what you said, I think because God is outside, I believe that God is outside our time, and therefore I think you're right that we can think of God as continually creating, and that's maybe what we see. I don't think that is in conflict with anything else that we've been talking about.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. But thank you, that's a great question. Really, really interesting. Anybody else got any questions? Very happy to have more questions. Thank you.
Just very briefly to support in there, the inquiries I've been making into the spiritual aspects of near-death experiences confirm that there's a mismatch between earthly time and time in another dimension as we understand it. That's quite a consistent phenomenon.
And I think that there are you talk about near-death experiences. I think there are lots of things in this world that we don't understand, that sort of experience is probably that sort of thing. And maybe at some point we will understand those sorts of things better. But I think at the moment we don't. And I think it's a mistake for scientists to give the impression that we understand everything. I think there are lots of things in life that remain totally mysterious to us. And I think it's wrong for scientists to dismiss things that we don't see, that we can't explain. Rather, we should look and see if we can understand what's there, but not, there's no guarantee that we will understand everything. And I think there really are things that happen and that people experience that at the moment we have no understanding of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Peter.
It seems to me there's a bit of a problem often in that people decide to be either studying arts or sciences, and really what we need is people like you, Luke, and Richard, who combine both of them. And I think maybe the education system, certainly in the past, used to sort of, you'd either be an art, you'd be studying arts subjects or science subjects, and there wasn't so much, intermixture.
Yeah.
And so it's easier to sort of say the scientists believe this and the artists believe this, and they weren't getting enough kind of interaction between both subjects. Really.
Yeah, I hear you totally, Peter. Thank you.
That was what happened in my school when we finished O-levels, and it was literally two different parts of the school that you went to. It was either the arts or the sciences, and you couldn't go across that gap at all. And I think that's a mistake. I think we specialised too early.
It's physics and philosophy, isn't it?
Yeah. And music and maths. I mean, there's so many overlaps in these things, aren't there? It's 7 minutes past 8, and I'm aware. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to meet again. And any of you who'd like to come again next Wednesday, we'd love to see you. The topic next Wednesday is, if God's a God of love, why is there so much suffering in the world? Again, I think it's a really big question and a worthwhile question for us to discuss. So if you'd like to come back, we'd love to see you back. And of course, bring other people if you'd like to as well. If you want to stay, if you just go through that door there on the right, there's a hatch there. You're welcome to have a cup of tea and to keep chatting if you'd like to. But I'm aware that some of you are probably thinking, I really want to get home to our beds now. So thank you all so much for coming this evening. I hope it's been helpful. And may I say a big thank you and ask for a round of applause for Richard. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jamie, also, who is recording all of this. It will go onto our website and onto our Facebook page, so you'll be able to share the video, watch it again, and I hope, again, that's helpful to you. I hope it's been a helpful evening to you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you all so much. God bless you.